Hello and welcome to another Brawl video. Today we're taking a look at a black-white sacrifice deck featuring Athreos, God of Passage. This is one of those Theros gods, so it's initially just an enchantment, an indestructible enchantment sitting on the battlefield, and once our devotion to white and black reaches at least 7 in this case, it also turns into a creature, a 5/4 creature that's still indestructible. And then in the meantime, whenever another creature we own dies, return it to our hand unless target opponent pays 3 life. So initially, the opponents may be okay losing some life, but once their life total gets low enough, they'll be incentivized to put those creatures back into our hand, and then we can replay them. We'll have a lot of effects that let us sacrifice creatures, and then combine that with Athreos' ability and effects that maybe drain the opponent while our creatures die, and we've got a recipe for success. So that's our game plan. I've split up the deck into a few different categories. The first one being a sacrifice fodder. These are creatures we don't mind sacrificing. They often leave behind an extra token when they die, and even though the tokens don't synergize with Athreos, since our opponent doesn't have a reason to pay life since we cannot return those to our hand, at least we have a lot of other effects that will drain the opponent as our creatures die, so having multiple creatures for 1 mana to sacrifice is a pretty good deal. And then we've got a lot of effects that will drain the opponent for 1 whenever a creature we control dies, so that's what we're trying to combine with enough sacrifice fodder. And our third category, a sacrifice outlet, which is a way to sacrifice creatures repeatedly without needing to pay any additional costs, so we can basically sacrifice our creatures at will while draining the opponent to death, and that's kind of the death by 1,000 cuts strategy that this deck tries to employ. Then we've got some removal, often some very efficient answers for just 1 mana that make us sacrifice a creature as an additional cost, which we don't mind since we can easily set that up. And then we can take out opposing creatures or even planeswalkers with those. And we also have some 4 mana board wipes to clear the board, and we can usually get back on it pretty quickly thanks to Athreos and thanks to some of these other cards that let us return multiple creatures at once out of the graveyard, which when paired with enough sacrifice fodder, sacrifice engines, and sacrifice payoffs can also maybe kill the opponent on the spot. And then finally, the miscellaneous section has a little bit of mana acceleration, couple extra card draw engines, including some powerful curve toppers at 6 mana, like Liliana and Bolas' Citadel. So that's our deck in a nutshell. Now for the deep dive, starting with our sacrifice fodder, lots of 1-drops that leave behind additional tokens, like Crawling Chorus making a Might, Doomed Traveler making a Flying Spirit token, Garrison Cat makes a Soldier, Hunted Witness makes a life-linking Soldier, Market Gnome just draws a card when it dies, the Freebooter makes a Treasure and lets us scry, then we've got the Infestation Sage making a Flying Insect, Nested Shambler makes a Squirrel, Linkbreaker makes a Mercenary, Serrated Scorpion will drain the opponent for 2 while gaining 2, and then we've got Shambling Ghast either giving something -1/-1 or making a treasure token. Stitcher Supplier is just a way to fill the graveyard when it enters and when it dies. And then we've got some 2-drops here that draw a card when they enter, Helpful Hunter and Spirited Companion, so we've got both a cat and a dog to make everyone happy. And then we've got our effects that will drain the opponent. Blood Artist is kind of the classic, also counts opposing creatures dying, so it's probably the most powerful of these effects. Although Marionette Apprentice is also great since it also counts when artifacts get sacrificed, and we've got a few ways to make treasure tokens in the deck. The new Vengeful Blood Witch is similar to Zulaport Cutthroat, which is similar to Cruel Celebrant. This is a 1/2 that also provides 2 devotion for Athreos. We've got the Bastion of Remembrance, which also makes a 1/1 human soldier token with the same effect. And then a Funeral Room also drains the opponent, whereas the Awakening Hall for 8 mana can recur all creatures out of our graveyard, so could also put it in kind of the graveyard recursion category. And then we've got Corpse Knight, which drains the opponent when our creatures enter, whereas the Sadistic Pilgrim gains life when our creatures enter while draining the opponent when our creatures die. And then a Pitiless Plunderer can make treasure tokens when our creatures die, so can also set up some powerful loops. And then at the Meathook Massacre, both a sweeper as well as a way to drain the opponent. Sadly, the Alchemy version no longer gains life. And then we've got our sacrifice outlets, and there's quite a few newcomers here as well, with a Drosshopper, a 2/1 that can sack a creature to gain flying until end of turn. Not the most useful ability, but we mostly care about this sacrificing stuff for free without any additional costs. Then we've got Bartolome, which can pick up +1 counters, can also sacrifice artifacts to it. The Curtal Aristocrat gains protection from the color of our choice. We've got Nantuko Husk getting +2/+2 until end of turn. The Soul Trader needs to pay 1 life, but also makes a treasure token. Woe Strider lets us scry 1 whenever we sack a creature, and also is joined by a Goat token. And then there's Yahenni, a 2/2 with haste that can become indestructible whenever we sacrifice another creature, and whenever an opposing creature dies, it picks up a +1/+1 counter. And then there's Yawgmoth, the most powerful of these effects, have to pay 1 life in addition to sacking a creature, but then we get to draw a card while also putting a -1/-1 counter on up to 1 target creature. And then we also have the Priest, which can only activate once per turn, sacks 2 of our creatures in order to make the opponent sacrifice 1, but we also get 2 black mana while also drawing a card, so it can also be very powerful. And then our removal section includes Swords to Plowshares and Fatal Push, which you're going to see in most black and white decks. And then we also have Annihilating Glare and Bone Shards, which can destroy an opposing creature or planeswalker, and Eaten Alive, which can exile them instead. And then we also have Accursed Marauder, making each player sacrifice a creature when it enters. And then our sweepers include Day of Judgment, Damnation, and Kaya's Wrath. Could also play Wrath of God. I'm not playing Deluge, since there's a chance it could end up removing Athreos, since -X/-X does get around indestructible, should it be a creature. And then a Grave Pact, also incredibly powerful in a sacrifice deck. Whenever a creature we control dies, the opponent has to sacrifice a creature. And then our Graveyard Recursion includes Abiding Grace, which can get back 1-drops turn after turn. We've got the Heretical Healer, a new addition to Arena as well, 2/3 lifelink. Once another creature dies, we can transform it into a Planeswalker, make a 2/2 zombie as well, and then the -X can get back creatures from our graveyard. Then Raise the Past can get back all 1 and 2 drops. There's Rally the Ancestors, can get back more expensive creatures as well without paying too much for it, but that's only until our next upkeep, so it's important that we have a sacrifice outlet to make use of all those creatures before they go away. And then Return to the Ranks, similar to Raise the Past, although we do have to pay for every creature we get back, but it also has Convoke, so we can tap creatures to help pay for it. And then we've already seen the Awakening Hall. And then our miscellaneous section has Esper Sentinel, good to play early, and then once we no longer need the taxation effects, we can still sacrifice it. Dark Ritual can set up some explosive turns. We've got Village Rites and Deadly Dispute as additional card draw, can also make a treasure with it. Lotho is pretty easy to enable in this deck since we have so many 1-drops, so it can also make additional treasures with it. Arcane Signet is always worth including, and then Black Market Connections and Phyrexian Arena can draw additional cards. The connections can also maybe make treasures or shapeshifters. And then we've got the Dreadhorde General, can make each player sack 2 creatures, drawing cards whenever our creatures die as well, or maybe make some zombie tokens. And then Bolas the Citadel is a lot of fun if we've got some life total to spare, and then can start playing stuff off the top. Eventually can also tap it, sacking 10 non-land permanents to make the opponent lose 10 life, so it can also be a legitimate win condition in this style of deck. And then the mana base is pretty straightforward, lots of dual lands for mana fixing, not playing too many utility lands, although Phyrexian Tower is certainly worth playing as it can sacrifice a creature to give us 2 black mana, so that can also help us ramp. And then we've got the channel lands for added utility, as well as a new addition here, Urborg, turning all lands into swamps, so that can also make it easier to cast cards like a Grave Pact, which are triple black. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, we're on the play. This hand's not exciting. Missing a way to ramp into Liliana. So I'll take my free mulligan. This is quite a bit better. Turn 1 Gnome. Signet fixes for black, so we can play Bastion. Could also sack the Gnome to Phyrexian Tower. Ooh, Thoughtseize on 1. I was gonna say, I'm actually tempted to play Phyrexian Arena turn 2 with the Phyrexian Tower. Just to get that going, but now they can snipe it. In which case, I guess we'll play the Signet. Our opponent actually took the Signet, so I'm kinda happy about that. Because now I can still play a turn 2 Arena, which will ensure that we find more lanes afterwards. And Mono Black is not gonna have a ton of enchantment removal. Priest is worth taking out with a Marauder. Although currently lacking black mana, so companions are only play. And a Shambling Ghast, so yeah. Could be in a bit of trouble. With a companion we could enable Phyrexian Tower next turn at least. Found a land. Okay, so problem now is if I play Marauder, Opponent sacks a priest and transforms Liliana. So we may want to put more creatures in play to try and pressure the Planeswalker. Maybe just go Bartolome. I guess we can go Linkbreaker and Ghast as well, if I sack the Companion, which seems worth it. Because then we'll have a bunch of sack fodder for the priest if that were to activate. And then now we can maybe play Marauder and pressure the Planeswalker right away. And then Athreos can also turn into a creature. So we might want to play Athreos, keeping Phyrexian Tower untapped, which can still cast Accursed Marauder. It's going to be a Hungry Ghoul. So sacrifice outlets, costing 1 mana. And our opponent's going to pass a turn. Liliana's excellent if we can ramp into it. But for now, I think we stick to the plan. Play Athreos. Sack Shambling Ghast for a treasure. And do we get it back? Yeah, our opponent should just take the damage, because otherwise with a treasure I can just replay it and go infinite with Bartolome, so at some point we'll have to take the damage. Play Marauder. And sack the Linkbreaker maybe. So Liliana transforms. They get a zombie, but I can still attack with Bartolome, potentially sacking 2 things to it. No need to pay a life here since it's a token. And then we'll have more ways to increase our devotion next turn. Although now we are potentially more vulnerable to the priest taking out Bartolome. Could have also considered sacking the treasure, but that helps us cast Liliana. So our opponent's looking to minus to get some value, perhaps. Carrier Thrall. Another creature that provides value when it dies. So they can minus and then still activate Priest. Yeah, losing Bartolome is not ideal, but we have another sack outlet with Yahenni, so it's not a disaster either. Just means less devotion for Athreos. Our opponent's life total is also getting kind of low, so they actually let us keep it. And now Rankle, okay. That attacks. Now the good news is we don't have any creatures in play that die to Liliana's -4, but our opponent does have an extra token, so we can't quite get rid of the more impactful creatures. So now with Lotho, we could go Lotho into maybe a hasty Yahenni. And then finish off Liliana at least. Yeah, that seems okay. So, I'm gonna fetch black-white. Will cost us some life. And then Athreos is a creature. So both at Liliana. Although I could also consider sending Athreos at the opponent's face. How bad is it if a Liliana pluses or -1 doesn't do much? So the 5 damage may be worth it. Opponent jumps Athreos actually, lets Liliana go. So our attack was correct.
Death news. Time to go.
Yahenni grows, and then do we play Bartolome? Could save it next turn to double spell with Lotho if we go Bastion plus Bartolome. But I don't hate having an extra attacker or thing to sacrifice to Rankle if needed. And then at least Yahenni we could still make indestructible if they wipe the board somehow. Our opponent could still play a 5th land, play Liliana again, attack with Rankle, sacking Priest, and then get something back out of the graveyard. Seems beatable, and yeah, that's what they're going for. So this is not going to count as casting, so Lotho may be the weakest link now. Opponent actually sacking Rankle himself to keep the Priest available. And then Lotho ended up in the graveyard.
The undead make great minions. Loyal.
And what's Liliana doing? So her opponent can still maybe activate the Priest here after all. Goes for Carrier Thrall.
Time to wake up and
So they will be left with 3 mana potentially, thanks to the Scion token. Yeah, and he grows. We sack Bartolome. We're also down to 7, so we'll see what happens. And a Liliana's Triumph. Wow, what a sequence. With a Liliana in play now too. Get rid of our Yahenni. And then I guess now Liliana lines up pretty well. So if we want to be guaranteed Liliana, I get rid of Bastion, even though it's a way of gaining a life.
let's reduce the battle to shambles.
Bones at 5. Our Phyrexian Arena is scary, and Bolas' Citadel at 6 life is maybe ambitious, although let's see. Now Scorpion's an option too, can play it, sack it to tower, which will trigger it, and then opponent lets it go to the graveyard, taking 3 more, so that doesn't work, so they have to send it back to my hand. So then we basically just got free damage out of it. Sure, free damage sounds good. And then with a life gain, do we maybe still go for Citadel? That seems greedy, when Liliana's a guaranteed answer to the opponent's creatures. And then next turn we can maybe have some fun with the Citadel.
If I were you, I'd just surrender. Yours will be
Alright, so Liliana versus Liliana. Nothing they can return. I guess I have to decide now if I keep Citadel or Scorpion. If they plus, never mind, we're empty-handed. So it doesn't matter what I keep, I think. Although it's actually interesting. Maybe if I discard Scorpion, our opponent doesn't plus Liliana to make each player discard. But yeah, they're probably going to.
You get used to the smell.
If whatever we kept was better than the Scorpion. Ooh, and a Graph Reaver. Look at that, an answer to our Liliana. Okay, so our opponent's still in the game.
What a drag.
We can play a freebooter, and that's it. So we could be in some trouble. Can sack freebooter to Phyrexian Tower, trigger it, and I guess get it back for free. And then we'll get to Scry. And then Yawgmoth is a sack outlet. And I guess if we're getting freebooters back for free, Yawgmoth sounds good. So we'll replay it. Empty my hand since they could make us discard. But I'm not gonna shuffle until next turn. Could have been a reason to fetch first to get the Surveil out of the way, but I may end up not fetching if my life total is in danger. If Reaver attacks, it's a free block. Because they can't afford to not give me... I guess that would let them then plus Liliana to make me discard. So that's the reasoning. Alright, in that case I'll take 3, I suppose. So maybe keeping Flooded Strand in hand wasn't so crazy after all. So yeah, there's a lot to keep track of. Liliana looking to get something back. Hungry Ghoul does not make food. It's going to be a minor, 2-2, cannot block. So every life point matters. Felstinger, opponent cannot afford to draw 2, but they could make me draw 2. And then I go to 1, so if I had fetched, I would have been dead here to the Phyrexian Arena. So they can force me to draw 2. I shall not be fetching. Does their opponent have 1 damage here somehow? I don't think so. Yeah, Rager is you draw and lose 1 life. Can't target the opponent. So could they have sacked Felstinger to itself to exploit it and then get it back with Liliana? You may sacrifice creatures, so yeah, they should have just sacrificed itself. And then Liliana wins them the game. Wow. So they actually missed a line. Official makes me discard. At this point, we should have it one way or another. Because yeah, I can attack after playing the Funeral Room. And then they either take it and lose 1, or block and give it back to me, which then drains for 1, and then I replay Freebooter, sack it to the Phyrexian Tower and win the game. Alright, I'll take it. Super close game. At 1 life, it doesn't get closer. So that goes face. Opponent takes it, and then now we just sack to Phyrexian Tower. So yeah, the land we started the game with ended up being super important. And a Damnation, sure. Awesome, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Glarb, Calamity's Augur. Our hand seems fine. Got a good mix of removal, card draw, sacrifice fodder, payoffs and outlets. And we'll maybe start by surveilling. Small chance we need to take out a mana elf. But it's just going to be a tap land. Alright, so we'll surveil. And then what are we looking for? It's hard to say. Witness, I guess, is good. Sacrifice fodder to go with the Soul Trader. Turn 3. Could also play Athreos first, although we're not close to enabling it, since our devotion is pretty low. Bristly Bill, not a problem right now. Play Soul Trader and pass. Alright, so won't be seeing Glarb anytime soon, it seems. The sequencing here also maybe missed out on 1 life had they played Druid class first. Take our turn, and then can maybe wait on Deadly Dispute and just go Athreos plus Witness. And then we cannot attack into Bill since it can turn into a 4/4. Can always sack a creature to get access to swords by making a treasure. And now a Stomper can get the black mana. Bill is getting quite large. And they're also gaining life, so it's going to be harder to burn them out. They are diversifying the +1 counters. Bill is playing defense. Alright, so I think we dispute sacking the Servo instead of the Witness. So we can maybe find 2 more Devotion. And Kaya's Wrath is interesting. Sage is +1 Devotion, so we're still going to be a little short. Maybe it's time to hold back a little bit. And just pass a turn. So Stomper needs 7 lands before it can attack and block. So unless they ramp, we still have a turn. Time for Glarb. So yeah, the Kaya's Wrath is looking pretty good. They did get to play a land of the top, so they got immediate value out of Glarb. And now a Swordtooth can play an extra land, so Stomper might still attack. Alright, so definitely good to have a Kaya's Wrath, since we're falling behind on board. Our opponent is attacking. And then... yeah, I guess we can sack the Apprentice as well. Sack the Witness, make some treasure. I'll sack the token before Apprentice dies. Opponent did give our creature back. Just making a bit of a treasure storage. They did not give the Apprentice back. Although we could now channel Abandoned Mire. Doesn't seem super needed. Alright, and then Bartolome is an infinite sack outlet. So I might actually end up channeling for Apprentice anyways. For now, Kaya's Wrath. And we're also not getting that one back. So... yeah, maybe it's fine to play Bartolome, which also discounts our channel, and just pass for now. So once we get back our Apprentice, both of these 1-drops are good for 5 damage each, assuming they put my creatures back in the graveyard. Alright, could also Swords Glarb now, but I'll take my draw step first. Ooh, Rally the Ancestors. Another great card. Although I still kind of want the Apprentice in play first. And then we'll be able to finish out the game with a Rally. So... yeah, Swords Glarb seems like a fine starting point. Channel back our apprentice. And then can play it. Make a token. Swords. And then we even have enough devotion for Athreos to attack. And our treasures also deal damage. So I'll sack the servo, don't want to sack the creatures or else Athreos no longer deals damage. And then now we can go sacrificing if we want to. Could also wait and do that at instant speed. Sure. But yeah, with a rally, getting back everything once again, we should have enough, unless there's meaningful disruption. Ooh, a River's Rebuke. Yeah, that's meaningful disruption. Could go sacrificing on the way out. A rally could also get back Athreos. Although I don't want to sack Athreos as my first creature. So I'll still try it this way. Now we do have another sack outlet in the graveyard with the Soul Trader. So don't actually hate sacking the Apprentice, and then we would be getting back, I guess, just Apprentice, Hunter, Soul Trader. If we do it for X equals 3, Soul Trader can make more mana. Opponent's at 9. So I don't think we'll quite have enough, since Athreos is gone too. So maybe we'll let the Rebuke resolve now. And it's not like our opponent made any progress that turn. So we'll just redeploy everything. Yeah, Rebuke can be backbreaking if you're kind of at parity. And then you can quickly tempo the opponent out. If it's just bounce your creatures back to stay alive, it's still good, but not game-ending. Now Green Warden is quite good with the Druid class, since that'll gain them a bunch more life. Courtyard also gains life. So it's possible our opponent will escape death once again. And now they've got a creature large enough to block Athreos. Eaten alive. We'll get rid of the Green Warden. So I don't think it's a Rally the Ancestors turn. And then sack a creature. Attack you for 8, and then we should be able to drain them to death. And yeah, our opponent sees the writing on the wall. With our 1-drops, that's 4 damage total, plus they either lose more life or give our creatures back. We recast them and finish the job. But yeah, Rally the Ancestors would have been pretty cool too at some point. Just getting back basically all our creatures after we've sacrificed them, and then we can keep sacking to the Soul Trader or to Bartolome, and Apprentice can close out the game for us. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. We are up against a blue-green ramp deck. Our hand seems fine. Turn 1 Ghast into Dispute is a good way to kick things off. That's how we used to cast 5-drops on turn 3 in Standard. And I'll maybe do it now in case they have a counterspell next turn. Okay, so just pass for now. Next turn, maybe go Nantuko Husk. Could also play Market Gnome, or we can save our treasures. Eventually the goal is to play Plunder with Nantuko Husk, so we can sack things to generate mana. Market Gnome plus Phyrexian Tower is also kind of neat. So we have a lot of options. Could also try Athreos and try and build up our devotion. This turn play Athreos, next turn go Nantuko Husk, Market Gnome, or Market Gnome, Phyrexian Tower. Doesn't seem needed for me to use the treasures yet. We might find a 6-drop next turn that we can just cast. Opponent runs out their commander, so that's a land for now. And a Village Rites. Okay. So now I'm also kind of liking Plunder, Gnome, Village Rites. Making a treasure in the process. And then we'll have the Plunder in play going forward. Resolve our expensive card while the coast is clear. Don't have to do this now, but I would like to draw 2. And then 1 more from the gnome dying. And our opponent will lose some life to Athreos, most likely. Apprentice isn't bad. Could play the Supplier, but I'll save that for next turn. Opponent takes 3 for Jin-Gitaxias. Alright, that's gonna make it harder to cast cards like Annihilating Glare, but Marauder is the perfect answer to a Jin-Gitaxias, so now I kind of feel bad for my opponent. So we can Supplier, play Blood Witch, play Marauder. Suppose going Apprentice would have made a little bit more sense, since we would sack the treasure for additional damage. But yeah, we can play the Apprentice next turn. And then we're hoping to top deck some Graveyard Recursion, since we've already milled a good amount of creatures. Yeah, this was the perfect answer. Vivian's Invocation now. Could be scary. But our opponent scoops it up, so they didn't find what they were looking for. And I'm pretty sure we have lethal next turn if we just play out some more creatures, animate Athreos, attack, and then we can start sacking stuff to Nantuko Husk, draining with the Blood Witch and the Apprentice. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, facing Wick, so a rat deck. Alright, so we've got a decent hand, I think. Sacrifice Fodder, Payoff, Enabler, and then Grave Pact could be quite nice. Ghast making a treasure also gives us more mana to work with. Could have maybe traded like a Day of Judgment for an extra land. And keep Shambling Ghast back on defense, I suppose. It's gonna be a rat colony, alright, is that what we're doing? So, no land is a problem. If Ghast attacks, our opponent just takes it. So yeah, we'll need to find a third land, although if we get to 4 mana for a Day of Judgment, we can deal with a bunch of colonies at once. Although there are ways to recur multiple creatures with the same name. The Echoing Return, I believe it's called. And there's a few variants. Opponent passes, we luckily found a land. And Swamp, I think, is a good starting point. So Bastion is reasonable, or we can start drawing with Phyrexian Arena to ensure more land drops. And then we should be fine. So yeah, for opponents on Rat Colony, they need a way to make their creatures unblockable, which, to be fair, blue might give them access to. Otherwise, they're gonna have a hard time getting past all our random 1/1s. And then we still have some good answers left. So opponent plays Wick. And that's a snail token. Alright, so we could already Day of Judgment if we wanted to. Don't have triple black for Grave Pact. But we can go Bastion plus Linkbreaker or Linkbreaker plus Athreos. And then have an indestructible god. That sounds decent too. Sure. Although it's maybe actually easier for the opponent to remove Athreos if it's a creature as opposed to just an enchantment. So we can pay 3 mana, sack a snail, deal damage, draw cards. So far just a 1 rat colony, so maybe they're not playing too many of those. And a Beastbinder that can remove abilities. And drew a land. So Grave Pact is decent. Although we could also double spell maybe Yahenni and Companion. And then next turn Grave Pact with Yahenni is going to be a lot more effective. Casting a Day of Judgment could also be good enough, but we do need to take counter spells into account as well. So let's maybe start with Companion. Find a priest, that's also pretty good. Although I'm still kind of liking Yahenni more. Athreos attacks. Opponent's going to maybe chump and sack to Wick. And we can keep Yahenni on defense. Right, opponent's going to counter that one. Fair enough. So we still have our Day of Judgment as a reset button. Would prefer to play Bastion before we Day of Judgment. Now Athreos, just a 2/2 with no abilities. So maybe I'll just take the 1. Can go Bastion plus Priests, which then sets up Grave Pact as well. And a Boots. That's fine. I'm gonna protect the Beastbinder to keep Athreos in check. Alright, so play Priest and Bastion, I want to say. And then the Grave Pact is going to be pretty impactful once we untap with a Priest. A Mana Drain actually counters. So opponent's got a good selection of counter spells. So the coast would be clear for Day of Judgment. But Day of Judgment's going to be a lot sweeter with Bastion and Cutthroat on the battlefield. Or we could just Grave Pact. Sure. Uses up all our mana. And then now blocking is going to be a lot more beneficial. So opponent gets their mana drain mana. Something like a Cyclonic Rift could be bad. So that's a reason to start making some trades. Mutavault gets busy. Also counts as a snail, I suppose, for Wick. So yeah, now we probably are fine trading for the Beastbinder, given the chance. And a Feed the Swarm to destroy our enchantments. Alright, don't see enchantment removal out of black very often, but Feed the Swarm is one of them. So they're down to 1 card in hand. Athreos loses its abilities. Yeah, I guess we'll set up the trade anyways. Could block with 1 additional creature, just in case. Opponent's gonna draw. Damage happens. Opponent's at 8. So we might be able to close out the game if we just go Cutthroat into Day of Judgment. Especially for opponents tapped out. Return to the ranks. Also has a bunch of stuff to get back. Although Cutthroat into Day of Judgment seems good enough. With 5 creatures on the battlefield, that would be 10 damage. Any point in attacking first? I guess there's no huge downside. So yeah, this game would have been pretty straightforward if they were on just Rat Colony, but our opponent made it a little bit more interesting for us. And then Athreos can go back to the command zone. And then now Day of Judgment should do it. Unless our opponent's got another counter spell in hand. Or maybe instant speed removal, but yep, that'll do it. Make a treasure, make a token, and then lose 8 life. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing Yarok the Desecrated, so an Enter the Battlefield deck. This hand feels a little light on lands. If we want to cast a Chaos Wrath, and then we have redundant Raise the Past and Rally the Ancestors, even though they do synergize with Stitcher Supplier filling the graveyard. So it is a close call, since Chaos Wrath should be good in the matchup. And then with Supplier, we might be able to set up a powerful Raise the Past and Rally. Alright, I'll try it. Turn 1 Shambling Ghast helps. Can maybe start there. Opponent's got the Innkeeper. Alright, land is good. So now I can afford to play the Apprentice. And hit you for 1. And we don't mind playing the Apprentice, even though it will eventually get swept up, because we have all this recursion. Lotus Cobra, that's a scary one. They would love a sacrifice outlet so we can sack Shambling Ghast, take out Cobra. But we don't have one at the moment. So it's probably just Athreos here. And then I don't mind offering the trade for Apprentice. Token can attack as well. I think we're the aggressor in the matchup, so I don't mind trading 1 damage for potentially more. Cobra triggers. And it's going to be a Provisioner. Another landfall payoff. So if they have any fetch lands, we could be in trouble. We also have the option of casting a Chaos Wrath already before our opponent can ramp out something too big. Although saving this until after Yarok enters might also be worth it. So for now we can Supplier. And milled 1 more creature, and then we can fetch a Surveil land to maybe fill the graveyard some more. Shambling Ghast attacks. And pass a turn. Alright, so we're hoping for a good Chaos Wrath. Brainstorm often followed by a fetch land, so that's what they're looking for. And it's just a command tower for now. Still enough to cast Yarok. there it is. Alright, so we'll gain 2 of Innkeeper. But they've already played land for turn. So it's definitely time to wrath the board. And don't need Urborg. Would be doing the opponent a favor, potentially. Nantuko Husk is a sack outlet, so that's also promising. Not going to attack, since our opponent would just gain more life in the process. And our opponent's probably going to pay 3 life for most of those creatures, so we don't get them back. So they're down to 12, down to 9, mill some more with Supplier. There's a Companion. Alright, so things are looking up. So I would prefer to play Nantuko Husk before we rally the Ancestors, but I can erase the past just fine. There's a Nissa. So still 4 mana available. And a Hostage Taker can take our treasure, I guess. Which I can sacrifice in response. Okay, so let's erase the past. And then get a bunch of triggers. And our opponent's gonna scoop it up. Yeah, Athreos attacking for 5 damage. And then, yeah, as soon as we find a sacrifice outlet here or take our turn with Nantuko Husk, we can keep sacrificing more stuff, triggering Athreos, and then Rally can do it once again. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, facing the Mycotyrant. So Day of Judgment should be effective. I'll keep. And turn 1, Link Breaker. Can keep up appearances, our opponent feels more comfortable playing stuff to the board. And Grimflayer is a good one if it gets going. So it could actually be a reason to Swords it already. Otherwise they get to fill the graveyard pretty easily and look for specific answers. So there's the Tyrant. Still gonna get connections going before we play Athreos. We'll hang back. Now green will certainly have some answers to enchantments. But they don't seem to have one in hand. Alright, so make a treasure and draw for now. And then we can Athreos play Witness. And they can probably put more cards in their graveyard at instant speed. But that's not gonna grow it right away, so I can attack for 1. Alright, nothing end of turn. And now Sir Conrad. That one's potentially scary if it gets going. Alright, so do we already want to cast our Day of Judgment? Could even play a Cutthroat first just to get more triggers, but that feels a little excessive. Maybe draw with a Clearing and see if that changes our mind. Alright, Deadly Dispute, so now I think we can afford to maybe wait another turn. Still don't think I play Cutthroats. I'll just pass. And then we can maybe chump and dispute. Ooh, Rishkar's Expertise. Could maybe find an instant speed answer to Sir Conrad now. And I guess we'll sack the Witness. Do we get it back? We do. And Rally. Alright, so that's good to know about. So our opponent will draw 5 and cast something for free. It's going to be Grief to take a look at our hand. That's unfortunate. Although it'll probably take the Day of Judgment. Yep. So we don't necessarily mind jumping with our creatures, since we can rally them back now too. Although we're still looking for maybe a sacrifice outlet. So now that Day of Judgment is gone, we can run out the Cutthroat as well. A Link Breaker back to hand. And no tokens. Alright, there's our sacrifice outlet. So we can do some serious damage. I might go all 3 modes here. We win a Priest. That'll take us a turn to activate. So let's do some math. I can play Cutthroat, play Husk, 2 1-drops, and then... yeah, I guess I can no longer rally. So this might still be more of a setup turn with Cutthroat and Priest. Replay Witness. And then next turn we can maybe combo with Nantuko Husk and Rally. And I'll hang on to my treasures. Sir Conrad also drains us. Opponent's gonna start milling. Alright. Could be dangerous if they mill more creatures with Rally in hand. Although it also deals damage. Alright, so we get to untap while our opponent's tapped out, so that's what we were hoping for. You have to be a little bit careful, but yeah, with Cutthroat, we should basically cancel out Sir Conrad's ability. So, should be safe enough to go all 3 modes again. And then play Link Breaker. Play Nantuko Husk. Activate Priest. Find another sack outlet. And then keep on sacrificing stuff. Could have maybe gotten an attack in first as well. But I just want to showcase the combo kill without needing to attack. Although I suppose playing Yahenni would make a little bit more sense, since it has haste. But again, we'll just get there without attacking. And then we'll sack the priests. And the husk can also sacrifice itself for what it's worth. Get the priest back. Cast it. Sacrifice it. Opponent's gonna give it back, and the opponent scoops it up, knowing about Rally the Ancestors. Plenty more sacrifice fodder in the graveyard. So we get to see our black-white sacrifice deck in action. And yeah, Athreos is a very fun commander, and not very easy for most decks to interact with once it's on the battlefield, so it tends to stick around. And then yeah, occasionally gets in for 5, but more reliably will drain the opponent for 3, and at some point, if the opponent's low enough, gets us in a spot where we can keep recurring our creatures for free, and then we can usually figure out a way to close out the game. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.